You are listening to The Fortress. Welcome back to The Fortress. Last week I told you that I'd probably talk a little bit about adultery. And so that's what we're doing this week. I'm going to dive right into the commandment from Exodus chapter 20, verse 14. You shall not commit adultery. Now I think the first thing we have to ask ourselves is, why does God even care? Why does the creator of the universe care whether or not a husband is loyal to his wife or whether or not a wife is loyal to her husband? Why does that matter to God? Well, I've got a couple of ideas about that, and I think one of them has to do with God's his habit of tending to give us great examples through symbolism. And that'll actually tie directly to what I want to talk about next week, which is the commandment, you shall not place any other gods before me. So what do I mean by that? Well, the church is the bride of Jesus Christ. And obviously, God, when he said, you shall not put any other gods before me, I mean, that is bad. It's not far. It's not a far stretch of the imagination to compare, the bridegroom and the bride, Jesus and the church. Whereas if we turn our backs on God, if we turn our backs on Christ, if we decide to turn to other gods, turn to other things like money, like fame, like power, like selfish indulgences, then that is kind of like adultery. It's kind of like what happens when a husband decides to take certain personal indulgences on himself in the place of his wife. In other words, he's not loyal. He places another woman ahead of his wife. And of course, vice versa with the wife cheating on the husband. So that's what I want to talk about. And I wanted to start with a little bit of personal experience combined with a hypothetical situation. I believe I've shared with my listeners before that I was a bouncer at one time. I worked security at a place called the Handlebar, did security for the concerts, checked IDs at the door, kicked people out when they didn't belong, when they were causing trouble and being disorderly. I also did that at another bar that was a bar/restaurant where the clientele changed just a little bit after 10 p.m. And so, why did I do that, you may ask? Well, I'm not a small guy, and I guess the owner thought I'd be a good deterrent. He knew he could trust me because I didn't drink. I mean, I still don't drink. So, that's something I did for a while. Now, if you know anything about the night scene, nightclubs, bars, all that, you can imagine I encountered a few women along the way. Now, this is way before I lost my wedding ring. I actually did lose my wedding band at a Clemson game. That's another story, but that came later. But back when I was bouncing, I wore my wedding ring, and I thought that would be a good thing. But however, it turned out that it turned out not to be that great of a thing. I noticed that I actually got hit on more by different women when I was wearing my wedding ring. Go figure. But what happened one time, and I've always just been a nice person. I like to help people. If somebody especially comes up to me and asks for help, well, I tend to want to help. I think that's why law enforcement and I, it seems like a good fit. So one night, and it was at the end of the night, nice young lady, she had, I don't know, sparked up a little conversation with me up at the door when she came in. She was just being nice, I thought. Some people would probably consider me a little naive back then. But so I was oblivious to whatever. I mean, if she was hitting on me, whatever. So she goes on about her business. Later on that night, she comes and she cannot find her cell phone. Or so she said. And so I tried to help her look for it. Well, it turns out she had been parked down in front of the bar on the street. And by the time she had left or whatever, I just, I had to lock up down at the bottom of the stairs. Her car was right there. She acted like she had just found her cell phone in the front. And then she tried to give me her phone number. Now, this is where the hypothetical goes in, or comes in. All right, because I could have done a few things at that point. I mean, she was attractive. I don't remember anything about her. Don't remember her name or anything. But I declined. I told her thank you, but no thanks. I'm married. I showed her my wedding band. She just kind of laughed it off. But right at that moment, couldn't I have taken that in a different direction? All right, so let's just pretend for a moment. Back then, this is like 2000. Oh, let's throw out 2008. That sounds like a good year. It might have been that year. So, what if I had decided, I think well, thank you for your number. You know what? I'll give you a call sometime. Well, right there, that is already breaking the loyalty. Right there. Now, I could have even, some people would say been cheating in my mind a little bit or whatever if I had maybe admired her some when I first met her or whatever. But that wasn't the case. I was just being nice. I had no clue. Well, I was just trying to help somebody out, basically. But what if I had taken that phone number? And what if later, I don't know, maybe I got in a fight with my wife or something, or she went out of town, and I was bored, and I started to consider some things, and maybe I'd be tempted to use that phone number to call, see what this person's up to. Before I would know it, maybe we'd go out and meet together. Grab a bite to eat. I'd find some excuse to go. All right, again, this is all hypothetical. I have not done this. My wife knows that. I'm just saying, can you see where this would go? Let's think about what would happen. All right, if I'd done all that. So, one thing leads to another. Right? But then all of a sudden, one day, somehow, the wife sees a text message here or sees something on Facebook or whatever. And then she's like, well, maybe that's just not what I'm thinking. So now she's really starting to pay attention to what the husband's doing. Now you are already having trust issues come into play. You see how this is already escalating. How many of the commandments can we go back and look at where once we give the devil room, things just start to escalate? And you guys that have been listening, you know, I've already been saying, Satan, he's going to tempt us. We need to pray for God's guidance so that we don't give in to that temptation. Fortunately, I didn't make a bad decision back then. I didn't go down this road. But could it have happened? Absolutely. Could it happen to you? See, that night actually did open my eyes. Because, I used to tell my wife all the time, and she knows, I've always been I think one of my strongest traits I've always had is loyalty. So I would tell her, well, honey, there's no way I'd ever cheat on you, blah, 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 But that night was the first time I realized I could if I had the opportunity. Or the opportunity would be there. It wouldn't be that difficult to open that door. And so that was kind of eye-opening for me. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. And so we're going to, look at this from a couple of different angles a little later, in a little later segment. But that's what I wanted to open up with. I could have really gone down the wrong path right there. Fortunately, I didn't. Could it have happened more than once? Sure. But fortunately, I did not give in to temptation. I eventually didn't put myself in that environment anymore where the temptation would be there. So I want you to think about that. First of all, if you've ever told yourself, oh, there's no way I would cheat on my spouse, well, that's great, but understand that the devil is powerful. Don't think it could never happen to you. In other words, just don't be complacent. Because complacency can get you hurt. Complacency can get you in trouble. If you think it can never happen to you, all of a sudden that devil's right on your shoulder as you see that interesting woman that you met here or met there, and you give in to temptation before you know it. So that's our first segment. I'm going to go to a break. When we come back, I'll read a little bit from the Bible. I'm going to try to use some expression so it's not boring. But there's actually it's fascinating chapters from the book of 2 Samuel. And we'll talk about David and Bathsheba.
Shut up and sit down.
An Egyptian holy man for the religion of Islam is assassinated, and the killer leaves a gold cross as his calling card. The same Christian assassin kills on U.S. soil, and it is now up to the FBI and Interpol to bring him to justice. FBI agents John Knox and Beth White team up with Interpol Inspector Malik Sharif, but they are at a loss when the assassin leaves no trace of evidence at crime scenes. Meanwhile, the assassin is starting his own personal war with Muslims, and the government he works for becomes suspicious. Can a Christian FBI agent and a Muslim Interpol officer put aside their differences and perhaps even use them to track down the assassin? Can Agent White battle her spiritual demons? Can the agents find the killer before the media turns the case into an international religious circus? Join the investigators on a journey that will remind you of the latest assassin-style video game and your latest crime novel. But before it's all over, ask yourself, is the assassin any different than you or me? Or is he just misguided?
Welcome back. So what example of adultery do we see in the Bible? Well, I think it's safe to say the most obvious example, probably the most famous, is King David and Bathsheba. And that is actually found in the in the book of 2 Samuel. Or I guess the second book of Samuel, sure. The book of 2 Samuel, chapters 11 and 12. I'm not going to read both chapters in their entirety, but we pretty much will. I do want to read all of chapter 11 because it's a good story. It's a really good story, but I want to, and then start into chapter 12 as well, because not only do we see what happened, but you'll see that effect, that gateway effect of how once one door is open, it's just everything's downhill from there. It just starts snowballing, and that snowball gets bigger and bigger and bigger. All right, so this is the story of David and Bathsheba. In the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. One evening, David got up from his bed and walked around on the roof of the palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful, and David sent someone to find out about her. The man said, "She is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam and the wife of Uriah the Hittite." Then David sent messengers to get her. She came to him, and he slept with her. Then she went back home. The woman conceived and sent word to David, saying, "I am pregnant." Obviously, it didn't happen just like that quick. But all right, so David sent word to Joab. All right, now listen. He already committed the adultery, right? Here's where the snowball starts rolling. All right, he's already feeling guilty. All right, so let's listen to what David does. So David sent this word to Joab: "Send me Uriah the Hittite." And Joab sent him to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked him how Joab was, how the soldiers were, and how the war was going. Then David said to Uriah, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." So Uriah left the palace, and a gift from the king was sent after him. But Uriah slept at the entrance to the palace with all his master's servants and did not go down to his house. David was told. Uriah did not go home. So he asked Uriah, "Haven't you just come from a military campaign? Why didn't you go home?" Uriah said to David, just to stick it to him, make him feel a little worse, "The ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my commander Joab and my lord's men are camped in the open country. How could I go to my house to eat and drink and make love to my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing." So now David's seeing what a loyal guy Uriah is. Loyal to country, loyal to his troops, loyal to his leaders. All right, so then David said to him, "Stay here one more day, and tomorrow I will send you back." So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. At David's invitation, he ate and drank with him, and David made him drunk. But in the evening, Uriah went out to sleep on his mat among his master's servants. He did not go home. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it with Uriah. In it, he wrote, "Put Uriah out in front where the fighting is fiercest. Then withdraw from him so he will be struck down and die." Whoa, that snowball is really rolling. So while Joab had the city under siege, he put Uriah at a place where he knew the strongest defenders were. When the men of the city came out and fought against Joab, some of the men in David's army fell. Moreover, Uriah the Hittite died. Joab sent David a full account. He instructed the messenger, "When you have finished giving the king this account of the battle, the king's anger may flare up, and he may ask you, 'Why did you get so close to the city to fight? Didn't you know they would shoot arrows from the wall? Who killed Abimelech, son of Jerubbesheth? Didn't a woman drop an upper millstone on him from the wall so that he died in Thebes? Why did you get so close to the wall? If he asks you this, then say to him, moreover, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead. So the messenger set out, and when he arrived, he told David everything Joab had sent him to say. The messenger said to David, the men overpowered us and came out against us in the open, but we drove them back to the entrance of the city gate. Then the archers shot arrows at your servants from the wall, and some of the king's men died. Moreover, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead. David told the messenger, say this to Joab, don't let this upset you. The sword devours one as well as another. Press the attack against the city and destroy it. Say this to encourage Joab. When Uriah's wife heard that her husband was dead, she mourned for him. See the consequences of one bad decision by two people? After the time of mourning was over, David had her brought to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing David had done displeased the Lord. Whoa. Talk about just a big old snowball rolling downhill, and then the worst happens. We went from really just lusting after her from the balcony to committing adultery to really not being honest, but feeling guilty because, oh, wait, we're learning that this guy's actually a pretty nice guy, pretty loyal to the army and all that, and then we have him killed. So, actually, I don't have to read much of chapter 12, but long story short, Nathan ends up rebuking David. Nathan was under the tutelage of Samuel, and Nathan basically rebukes David. He basically tells him that, you know what? Unfortunately, God knows what you did. And David becomes aware that he's going to lose a son. Now, because of David's prayer and, repentance, Solomon does come out of the marriage of David and Bathsheba. But they lost one son after just 10 days, I believe. Yeah. So, I mean, can we see how just bad things happen when we open that door? When we open the door for sin, you can expect certain results. And those results are not nice. It's just this awful chain of events that starts. And it gets worse and worse and worse. You can see how this thing we call sin is a lot like addiction. How addiction can affect someone individually. And how they give in, and at first they try this little thing here, but then they feel, well, okay, it won't hurt me to just try this over here, until they got to have more and more and more, and it gets worse and worse. Then they'll even start doing things, maybe breaking more laws just to get their hands on something out of desperation. They get really desperate. Until you know it, they'll kill for it. They'll fight for it. They'll hurt somebody for it. They'll steal it. They'll tell lies just to get their hands on some. So, adultery is no laughing matter. It's very serious. But then again, so are every one of the violations of these commandments, if you think about it. If we get right down to it. And that's why I started with, you shall not covet. You know, if you covet your neighbor's wife, well, doesn't that open the door for adultery? Yeah. So really, once David set himself up to look over the balcony, He's already coveting somebody else's wife or somebody that's not his. All right, so he's lusting after someone, and then he wants to find out more about her. He finds out she's married. He still has her up to his, his little bungalow, wherever. So it's just not a good thing. It's kind of a slippery slope. And so the next little segment, I just wanted to read that section of 2 Samuel to you, and so you hear the story of David and how he manipulated a situation to actually commit. I mean, it was basically murder. He premeditated the murder of Uriah. He just used an indirect weapon. He just put him in the most dangerous spot. His commander just had to do what he was told because David was the king. So, speaking of slippery slopes, that's what we'll talk about in the next segment. So when we dive right into that, I want you to think about maybe some of the slippery slopes you've been at the top of. Hopefully you didn't go stumbling down like the snowball that we just heard. But more of that after this break. Let's see here. I'm pulling things up on my computer right about now. Let's see what I can do on this newfangled machine. Jason-e-fort.com. Enter. Well, hey, Bob, what you doing there? You got yourself a fancy new computer. Look at that shiny thing. Oh, hey, Leroy. Yeah, I just thought I'd get on here and I'll pull up that author buddy of ours. I thought I'd pull up his website. So here it is, right in front of us. Look at this. Look at the professionalism. This is a really cool place to visit. Leroy, have you checked this out? Oh, yes, what I've been telling you about, Bob. That is what I've been telling you about. That's what my old buddy Vladimir and I were talking about just the other day. You got to go to that website, people. Go out there and visit it. There is tons of stuff to just read and just expose your mind to and see if you think like this guy or not. That's really all it's about. Well, it says here, Leroy, there's a little more to it than that. I mean, it says he's trying to do something. Right here on the home page as it pulls up, I'm gonna pull this up for you now. Right, I went back to the home page. Oh my goodness, look at them pretty trees driving right by. It's like a moving picture right behind the words. That is pretty cool. Anyway, right up there in the corner, you see that? You see that there? Leroy, that says revealing light in the darkness. Now, what is that talking about? Well, Bob, I think he's talking about Jesus. If you look at some of the stuff he's writing about, yeah, I think you'll see. You're gonna see. I tell you what, you go. We'll look at some of the other fancy stuff, but go over there to that blog page. Go to that blog right there. Let's go check that out. All right, Leroy, hang on. You know I'm not a fast typer. Oh, see, you didn't have to type. You just had to put the little magic finger picture on there. That's it. What is that topic at the top of that blog? It says, "Blessed are the peacemakers." This sounds biblical. Leroy, I think you're on something. Yeah, I think our buddy Jason, I think he's a Christian. I think he's like us. I think he believes. Yeah, I reckon so. Look at this next one. Look at this. He talks about evil escalates until it's outmatched or stopped outright. I think I might want to read about that. these pictures are pretty fascinating, and I'm looking over here. Leroy. Boy, look at this. He's got something about the approaching storm. We had a rough spout of storms the other day, didn't we? Oh yeah, I had hail coming down, denting my car and everything. Yeah, well, look, he's got stuff about an approaching storm. I don't know if it's about an actual storm or not. Spiritual warfare, what if? Love wins. A great big hole in his heart. I tell you what, this guy, he writes a lot. That's what I've been trying to say. I'm so glad you finally got to see. What's this section over here? Go over there, Bob. See what that says. Hold your horses, Leroy. All right, putting the magic finger picture like you said right there. Oh, man, look at that. That is like home. See that background right there? All the fog rolling in over the mountains. That's got to be like the Blue Ridge Mountains, I tell you. Yeah, just remember, them Blue Ridge Mountains ain't nothing like the Rockies. Yeah, I bet that feller out there, Pastor Keith, I bet he knows something about mountains. I reckon you're right, but that's pretty cool. If you look at his books here on this page that pulled up, I guess we better get back on topic. The Knox Mission. Misguided, yep, I've talked about that. Mistaken. Misled. Tracking game. Oh, I think he's got one more. Yeah, you missed it. It was on the front page. It was right there. Dead memories. Go back to the home. Anyway, boys and girls out there, y'all know what we're talking about now. So go visit it. www.jason-e-fort.com. I reckon he's right, guys. Y'all just come on out to the website, see what it's all about. Y'all have a good one now. Okay, so let's talk about that slippery slope. We're standing at the top of a hill. What kind of things lead into starting to go downhill? What, sets us up to give into something like adultery? I gave you one example already. I mean, did I kind of dance at the top of a slippery slope a little bit when I worked as a bouncer? I think so, sure. Especially once I learned that women were capable of not really caring if you were married or not. They were still going to hit on you. They were still going to make a move. Because I made it blatantly obvious that I was married. I didn't hide it, didn't deny it. So I was going into an environment where there's temptation around. So if you put yourself, especially intentionally, into situations where that temptation is there, that can open the door for it. But, I mean, it doesn't have to just be out at, singles bars or places like that. There could be opportunities you might take at work. There could be just that opportunity you try to create. Somebody creates it because all of a sudden you notice somebody's willing to pay you attention. Oh, there's a slippery slope, right? Oh, where could that go? Well, I mean, if it's at work, it could get you in trouble at work. Is the other person married? Because, wait a minute, we could even start something here. We actually have had to deal with that, in our police department. Or we have to intervene because, this guy right here just found out that his wife is talking to this guy. Uh-oh. Are you starting to see the big picture here? The consequences that can come about. But it doesn't even have to be with real people. I've already mentioned the word addiction. A lot of people don't want to talk about it, don't want to mention it, but what about pornography? Pornography is addictive. And if you do that, well, you're already basically guilty of adultery, even though the physical intention part, it might not be, possible, but the lust is there. Therefore, you're already guilty. And that could maybe stir you, prod you, point you towards other avenues. Seeking out other avenues. Other alternatives to the person you're married to. And so then you have that whole slippery slope again. What activities have you maybe participated in where you can think that, oh, wow, maybe it's more possible than I thought? Think about that. I don't necessarily want to hear from any of y'all about this unless you really need to ask my opinion on something. But but I would like everybody out there listening to just take a moment and think about this. Now, if you are like me and loyalty happens to be one of your strong suits, great. But that doesn't mean you let your guard down. I have to pray about this. I know other guys out there who are believers have to pray about this. I've been in men's groups where we've gotten together in small settings and in small groups of 2 or 3 guys, 3 or 4 guys, and we got to talk about this, and the struggle is real, as they say. So, what you want to do, it's very similar to, alcoholics. What do they need to do to not set themselves up for failure? What do they need to do to avoid falling into the temptation for that drink? Well, they don't need to go to bars, right? They don't need to go where they have easy access to drink alcohol. So perhaps if I don't want to be tempted with something like adultery, I don't need to go where I know the attractive ladies are, especially without my attractive lady. In other words, don't be single. Don't appear single in the wrong place. Now, again, I could have gotten in some real trouble if I'd wanted to. My wife and I have talked about this before, so I can kind of laugh about it now. But, I was very honest with her, very straight up, and said, hey, you won't believe this. But, I probably don't have to worry about that now anyway because I'm 40. But, it just don't put yourself in that situation. Watch out for that slippery slope. Can you think of the other things that could happen because of adultery? What does that open you up for? Well, we already kind of mentioned. Okay, so, you could lose a job if you end up fraternizing at work and end up fooling around at work and cheating on your spouse at work. Not only could it end your marriage, but you could lose a job. Of course, it's going to affect, if you have children, what about the circumstances surrounding that? It could be devastating. Devastating for that child to think that their parent was just not loyal. Especially if they're old enough to kind of understand what it means. But then put yourself in the shoes of the confused child who doesn't understand. Why are mommy and daddy getting a divorce? What does that even mean? Why can't we just all be together? See, that's the kind of tragic circumstances this awful sin can open the door to. And then, of course, jealousy. If if a husband cheats on his wife and the person he cheats with is cheating on her husband too, spouses find out about it. Oh my goodness, you could be setting up the perfect scenario for a miniature World War III. It would be awful. And yet, I've seen that dynamic take place. I've seen it work its way out to where people could somehow get along, and that's really odd. But I've also seen people go to jail over this stuff. And of course, people have died over this stuff. Now, I've been fortunate enough to not work directly with a case like that, but I know it's happened. So that slippery slope of sin, we could just start anywhere along the line. Well, let's see. I covet my neighbor's wife. I go ahead and make a move on my neighbor's wife. I end up committing adultery with my neighbor's wife. I end up lying about what I did. I end up covering it up. Well, I end up feeling guilty. So then I end up being dishonest and really not even genuine in my wife's presence because I'm trying to cover up things. And so I'm not even showing genuine love. And then on top of that, what else could happen? Well, maybe I could cause conflict because the wife finds out about it. So all of a sudden we get in a fight over it. And then I end up abusing her. Yes, there have been domestic squabbles over this stuff. And the worst happens where the wife shoots the husband or the husband shoots the wife. Then turns the gun on himself. See, that's the most extreme circumstance. That's when you hear those tragic murder-suicides. A lot of times it's because of this right here. Don't play around. I recommend to all you people out there, if you're listening, stay close to God. Dive into His Word. Find out what He says about marriage. Find out how He says we should treat our loved ones, our spouses. And try to avoid getting into those situations on that slippery slope. And I've got one more segment. A little bit more about what that'll be about. When we come back. I don't want to give it away.
Well, hey, Bob. You know what I was just looking at? I was just looking at Mr. Jason's new website. Have you taken a look at it yet?
No, Leroy, I honestly haven't taken a gander at it yet. Shh, here he comes now. Hey, fellas, what are y'all up to? How'd y'all get here? Wait a minute, I never see y'all around here. What are you doing?
Well, we just thought we'd come by and visit, pay you a visit, and your laptop just happened to be open right in front of us. And Mr. Jason, we opened it up, went to your website.
Yeah, I made a few changes. Love for anybody to stop by. www.jason-e-fort.com and visit the blog posts. See the videos. There's a new video page with a lot of links to videos that I've made. Who knows? You might even run into the occasional Bob or Leroy take. These two fellas that I happen to be talking to right here.
That's right. You better mention us, Mr. Jason. We've been doing it for you now.
been putting your name out there, telling about your website. You guys listen. This author's on to something. He's talking about Jesus. He's talking about good things in life. He's talking about dangerous things out there that although we should pay attention, Jesus has our back. As long as we got faith in him, we can make it through anything. What you think about that, Mr. Jason? I couldn't have said it better myself, Bob. That's right, Mr. Jason. Well, okay, we'll leave you alone now. Sorry, I didn't mean to disturb you. But we'll catch you later. Peace out.
Agent John Knox faces ghosts from the past as he and Malik have to track down a mysterious killer who is creating social disorder by killing both cops and black criminals. Meanwhile, a small witness to the brutal murders wrestles with fears of coming forward to the right people and telling them what he has seen, while dealing with nightmares of men in white hoods and burning crosses. Through all the chaos, a former pro athlete turned mayor has to try to rein the citizens of the city in without making the police department look like bullies. The activity will be at it once again, this time holding puppet strings that could very well affect the way law enforcement is carried out in cities across the country. Can John Knox use memories from the past to help the FBI prevent a chaotic future? Can Malik offer assistance without getting too distracted by other factors? Will citizens of Detroit keep the peace, or will they just be misled down the path to social disaster? Join your favorite two agents again as they take on their most challenging mission yet in this thriller ripped from the headlines that will have you look inward at your worldview and ideas of how people treat each other in Book 3, Misled.
So this is the last segment. Started out with Exodus 20:14. You shall not commit adultery. What does this have to do, really, in the great big scheme of things? What does this have to do with us and God? I started out by asking, why would he care? What if he wanted us to understand the impact and consequences of making a bad decision like that, and maybe even seeing how our relationship with him should be the same? If Jesus is the bridegroom of the church, if the church is his bride, well, then he's our protector. He's going to provide salvation, or he has provided salvation. Then we should be respectful to him. We should honor his place in that relationship. But unfortunately, and this is just my opinion, but I think society kind of reflects my opinion pretty well. I think the church, over the years, has turned its back on Christ every now and then, or has even put something else before him, and then, of course, suffered consequences because of it. I think when a church, a large church, all of a sudden starts depending on money, and I mean, I know money is a necessity, especially in this world, but if we start to rely on it and depend on it so much that it becomes the focus, the one focus, and the focus is no longer Christ, certain things happen after that. Or what if the focus no longer becomes Christ, but the church itself starts to focus on one man, one person? Now, I don't blame some of the churches that have been set up, and this, I've even kind of seen this happen on occasion with some members. I don't think the whole church itself does this necessarily, but if you have a very charismatic person leading the church, it might not even be his intention for that to happen, yet I think some members may exalt this or raise this guy up on a pedestal so high that they lose focus on what the focus is supposed to be, and that is Christ. But that's really not all that different from adultery, is it? How else have we, and when I say we, I don't mean necessarily the whole body of believers, but as far as different churches go, different sects of the church, different denominations, I mean, what have we done to cheat on God? Well, I think one of the things that we as society in America, which is supposed to be a leading Christian nation, I think we have let secularism take over. I think we have let secularism rule the day. Whether intentional or not, I guess that's the biggest difference there. Some things we didn't really mean for it to happen, but when we stop doing what Christ instructed us to do, there were consequences. When we chose to do other things besides what Christ told us to do, there have been consequences. Especially if we decided to pick something else over what God wanted. So we made something else our God, or we made something else our priority. Whether that be community standing or money, who knows? I think there have been a lot of different problems and that have been the result of we believers turning our back on God. Can you think of such things? I think you could easily think of maybe a situation or two in maybe not churches you've been a member of or a church that you go to, but perhaps churches you've heard of, where churches have divided over certain issues. Did they maybe make the division take priority over Christ? Whatever that dividing factor was. Maybe a pastor embezzled some money. Maybe someone in the church was unfaithful with another person. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. But what if people got so upset about that, they stopped believing altogether, or they just all of a sudden they make up their mind, well, I don't like this church anymore, I'm going to forget about this, and maybe they were in it for the wrong reasons in the first place. I don't know. There's something to be said for loyalty. And we should be loyal to Christ. Of course, I'm just as guilty. We as people are not always loyal to Christ. And I think some people are better at the whole evangelism thing than others. There are some people who just have it in their heart. They meet a stranger on the street. They start talking about Jesus. Now, I mean, I'm very situational. If it comes up in conversation, great. But I don't always steer it that way. So maybe that's my weakness. And yet, the last thing Jesus told us before he left was go and make disciples of all nations. I just wanted to bring that to the forefront of your mind. I almost want to just dive right into what I'm going to talk about next week. But putting other gods before God himself, well, that opens up a whole new can of worms. But I think adultery reflects that. If we, I don't know, I'm not trying to be sexist or anything like that, but if we look at the man's role, the husband's role in the marriage, I mean, just the way the Bible sets it up, how the woman will leave her family and will go to the man, the husband, and they will become one flesh. Well, so that man is basically the provider at first. I mean, otherwise, why would she leave her family? Why is it not the man leaves his family? Maybe I'm reading too much into it. But if that's the way it's supposed to be, we're supposed to be loyal to one each other, become one flesh. Is that not a whole lot different from what God wants with us? He wants a relationship with us. He wants a relationship. We should strive to have a relationship with Jesus. If we make that our focal point, then these little things like sins, these commandments that were given to us, they come naturally. We don't do those things. All the shall nots, we just don't do them. Because you put God first. And again, I'm not pointing fingers because I'm just as guilty as anybody else. That's why I need Jesus. That's why we all needed Jesus to do what he did. Otherwise, it'd be a lost cause. Because Jesus is the only perfect man who ever existed. So that's our food for thought. Adultery. Don't do it. Killing. Don't do it. Stealing. Don't do it. Coveting. Don't do it. Lying. Don't do it. Yeah, I know. These commandments were kind of tricky, right? A whole bunch of do nots. Whole bunch of do nots. Well, you know what? That's okay. That's okay. We'll talk more about this next week. I want you to just think this week. Think about the whole topic of adultery, that slippery slope of sin. Apply it to any of these sins. Apply it to any of these commandments that we can break. It's a slippery slope. That's because Satan knows what he's doing too. So we just have to pray that God gives us strength to fight temptation and not give in to the urge to break certain commandments. You guys have a blessed week. Hope everyone has a great one. And I'll be back next week.